I have a question for all those anarchists who support open borders, who say that you have to be consistent with the theory, with the non-aggression principle at every step of the way, well, they probably take the deontological approach and say that the consequence should be consistent with the means, or the means should be consistent with the consequence, with the end, and that we cannot aggress against people and just in order to feel secure, that we cannot prevent people from crossing a border just because we are afraid that the welfare system is going to collapse and or ISIS is going to come and take over. So I have, I think, two questions. Let's see. Let's start with the first one. The first one is, if you would know for sure that the consequence of opening the border would be a total collapse of the welfare system. Let's say that you live in Germany or whatever. For some reason, you have an effect on the government. For some reason, somehow, you can affect what government chooses to do, and you sit with Mrs. Merkel, and you convince her to really open up the borders to anybody. Anybody wants to get in, comes in, but she gives you this, but she says, like, I'm still going to be the prime minister, and we're going to give them tons of welfare. But we're going to open the borders, so hey, it's a libertarian progress. Hey, we made something libertarian, and I mean, you didn't make you have no say about the welfare, but for some reason you have a say about the borders. And she opens the borders, and you get like millions of very poor and unskilled immigrants come over, and they take the welfare, and the welfare system collapses. And there's no more money to pay for the poor now, and the sick. There's no more public hospitals explode. There's no money for public services, health, whatever. Everything collapses. Will you still go through with? Will you still support this scenario if you know that the welfare system is going to collapse in one day, and you're gonna get like a really, really, really bad outcome? I mean, don't we want a gradual transition to a free society? And look, I'm one of those anarchists who say now is the time. Like, I want anarchy today. I don't care about the gradual change. Like lots of minarchists or anarchists that support minarchism for now, they tell me, look, Eyal, you cannot make this, we're not ready as a society for anarchy. The change has to be gradual because we want people to be ready to have alternative solutions waiting for them. Simba, check it. And I say, okay, the change will be gradual anyway because it takes time to create more anarchists. So, I mean, it's going to take time. Turning people into voluntarists takes time anyway. And when are we going to be ready? When everybody says, okay, now is the time. So it's kind of like a circular argument to say now is not the time, society is not ready to be anarchist, to be free, because too many people don't believe it can be free, right? Like if everybody believes the society can be free, then we can turn into a free society tomorrow and give charity and provide and just make the arrangements. But the argument against a free society tomorrow cannot be because not enough people believe that we can be free, so we can't be free. Okay, but that doesn't mean that doesn't show that I don't have to support liberation of the human race now, because we just need enough people to do it to say, okay, I think that tomorrow we need a free society, today we need a free society. If enough people do it, we are ready, but because not enough people do it, we are not ready. So if I'm not going to be the first or among the first people who say now is the time, we're never going to get there. I mean, we need enough people that say now is the time in order to get there, and it's going to be gradual change anyway, so it can't be an argument, the gradual transition. The gradual transition argument is just a logical fallacy, because it says like, oh, I'm not supporting a free society because I think we are not ready now, then we will never be ready. We need enough people to say now is the time in order to get to that time, and it's going to be a gradual change anyway. You get me? Okay. So it's not like I'm saying, let's make it the transition, let's first minimize the government or such a thing, let's reform the government. That's not my position. My position is I support anarchy tomorrow. But it will just take time. It will be a gradual transition. Okay, but let's say, hypothetically, that the system can collapse while people are not ready for free society. Take, for example, Somalia or Venezuela. I mean, those places, the system have collapsed there in Somalia. It has totally collapsed to the point that there is no government at a certain point in time, and today they have a small government because people are statists. They didn't say, oh, let's liberate our society. This is not what happened in Somalia. It just the system failed. And what happened in Venezuela? Well, the system failed. They still have a government, and the situation is very bad. But no, I don't think that the government can support the poor. They can barely feed the people who have money. And so, do you really, if acting in a way that is consistent with the non-aggression principle would lead us to a situation like in Venezuela, where lots of people are hungry and there is not enough food for everybody, and the government is trying to fix this by robbing everybody who has money and nationalizing every business in order to try to make equality and so on and so on. So, if the results of you acting in a way that is fully consistent with the moral principle leads to a disaster, and it's not because acting in a way, maybe it also is, but I'm not saying that the natural consequences of acting in a consistent way with the NAP brings to a disaster. I'm saying with the current circumstances that we live in, it may lead to a disaster. So my first question is, will you still support being consistent with the non-aggression principle, knowing that most probably the consequence is going to be a disaster? So hypothetically, if you know that most chances are that it will lead to a disaster, like collapse of the welfare system and government not releasing and society not becoming free. I mean, the fact that the system collapses doesn't mean that people become voluntarist, right? I mean, we much better have people have a good economic system, and we have them have jobs and free time and time to look in videos on the internet and change their philosophy. We much better have that transition to anarchy than just government failing and taking over all the businesses and killing all the businesses and everybody starving to death. That's not really a good way to move to a free society, is it? Well, you know what? That's the first question. Do you prefer having the government destroy the entire economy as a way to transition to a free society, or do you prefer this not to happen? Because the second question is, do you support acting in a way that is consistent to the non-aggression principle, although it may very probably lead to government granting you this, saying like, oh, we take the political correct approach and the humanitarian approach, and we open the borders and we help the poor and we help the diseased and we help those hungry people in Africa. I mean, we just let them in and we give them money. I mean, letting them in is the more consistent with the non-aggression principle than not letting them in. Yes, the welfare thing is theft, is robbery, but hey, at least we stop doing one crime, which is preventing people from crossing an imaginary line. So you say, well, I support any action that is consistent with the NAP, or maybe I support any reform that is consistent with the NAP. So if the government today is A, stopping people at the border, and 2, stealing our money, I support any move of the government to stop doing one of it. I want the government to stop doing both, but I will support government if it does one. I will say, yeah, I support this move of the government. So, for example, if the government is taxing, if I have a business and my neighbor has a business and we're both being taxed heavily, and the government says, you know what, we want to, how about we stop taxing the neighbor? Eyal will still have to pay 50% tax, but we're going to stop taxing the neighbor. Will you support it? It's like saying, oh, we have 2 slaves and we're going to release one. That means that the other one is going to work much harder. Now, I wouldn't be in position of like, no, don't release the other slave, because the slave that gets left behind is going to work much harder. I don't think it's a call the time that I'm allowed to. It's not a. What I would do if there were 2 slaves and the government would say, well, do you want us to release one of them? Well, okay. Now, what if the results would be like, oh, the other one is going to just be overworked and is going to die? So, won't you rather free both slaves than support and say, well, I'm in support of releasing that one slave, knowing fully that the result will be that the other slave that gets left behind is going to do double the work, and he's just going to die eventually because being overworked. If you know for sure that the results of freeing one slave means the other slave gets to die, and it's like the trolley. It's the trolley problem. You get to pull the lever and you get to decide how many people die. It's damn if you do and damn if you don't. And that's the situation. You say, well, I want to support the openings to the border. Yeah, it's going to be a disaster in terms of welfare, and there are many other reasons why it's going to be a disaster. So, if you know that we have, for example, I'm in Israel, if you didn't notice by now, by the accent, we have a border with Syria, or is it Lebanon there, where we have, I think it's in Syria, ISIS is sitting on the border. We have like an area where ISIS sits, and they're sitting really on the Israeli border. Now, Israel doesn't attack them because they don't want to provoke another war. It's like not our business, and so on and so on. Now, the reason why ISIS is sitting on, it's funny because the not so much related, but the reason ISIS is sitting really on the border is that they know that their opponents cannot launch rockets at them, because the rockets might miss the target and go into Israel, and then it will be like an opening of another front. So they're taking advantage of the strategic situation there, and they sit on the border. Now, those people who behead their enemies, ISIS, they don't really like our way of life. I don't think that they can integrate so good with our culture. So, would you say would you suggest to me to support opening the border right there in that spot? Let's say that the government comes and asks you, look, we have a border with Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria, and we have a welfare system. We don't ask you, we don't care, but we give you one thing. We're going to ask you we're going to ask for your input on one thing, and we're going to do what you tell us. It's never going to happen, but let's say the government is telling you, like, okay, we give you the option to decide about the fate of the border with Syria. We're going to keep the border with Lebanon, Egypt, and Jordan, but you get to decide what we do with the border in Syria. It's just like the open border thing, where they tell you, like, oh, well, do you support open borders or closed borders? You have no say about the welfare state, but at least, hey, maybe you have some input on the border thing. So a criminal is telling you like, oh, well, I give you the option to reform my actions 1 day a week. The rest of the days I'm still going to be a criminal, but you get to call the shots every Monday. On Monday, you tell me what to do, and you're like, oh, I want to be consistent I have to be consistent with my principles. Fine. So let's say that criminal is robbing people, and every day he robs different people, and 7 competing businesses. Let's narrow it down. Me and my neighbor, we have competing businesses, and there's some sort of balance, and everybody enjoys this competition in prices. Like we have a bakery, and people enjoy really good prices and lots of products, because there are 2 competing bakeries. And I have a job, and my neighbor has a job, and it's good. You know, we're supporting our families. Everything is all nice. And 1 day a week, on Monday, the criminal comes and robs me, and on Tuesday he robs my neighbor. And then this criminal comes to you and tells you, oh, do you want me to be robbing people on Monday? Now, the consequences will be, if you say, no, I don't want you to rob on people on any day, and I support you, and I support that I'm in the position that you shouldn't rob on Monday. Well, the consequences will be that I'm not going to be robbed, but my neighbor will still get robbed. So the consequences will be my neighbor losing the competition, because I don't have to pay taxes. He does have to pay 50% taxes. I'm going to lower my prices. He's going to run out of business because of your choice. Yeah, you took the moral highway and you did the most consistent thing, but what was the outcome? The outcome was one person lost and the other one makes a fortune over that. So let's say same dilemma. I ask you whether we should open. Well, the government tells you, okay, we're going to let you decide over one thing. Like, you can't decide over all the other things, but we let you decide over one thing. Should we do the action that is more consistent with the non-aggression principle, or should we keep violating that principle on that particular one thing, not on everything, not in general, but on that particular one thing? And you say, well, you know, every step of the way has to be consistent with the principle. So yes, take away this the military that protects this imaginary line. What do you think ISIS is going to be doing? Are they going to just stay there and not cross this imaginary line once there are no more soldiers there? Do you think ISIS will not harm us in any way? Do you think everything ISIS does is just a result of the state attacking them, and they, like in a blowback thing, attacking us? I mean, do you think that it's not risky for us to just take away the border with Syria at that spot where ISIS are sitting, and well, that would be like risky, I think. I mean, I'm afraid, I would be afraid to be here if the government did such a thing. So the second or third question would be, would you tell me to really support an open border with Syria, knowing that we're going to have an influx of ISIS supporters, of mujahideen, of jihadists, of crazy terrorists? Do you think that we should do the action that is more consistent with the non-aggression principle and just support an open border with Syria? I support open borders everywhere. And if your answer is yes, then I have another question, and this is more than a question, this is a proposal. If you think it's not a risk to open the borders with Syria, and the only border I'm allowed to do is right here around my house, like I can put a fence around my house or my building if the neighbors agree, but I cannot put a border much far from here, like with Syria, then and you think that it's all a blowback thing, and you know, and we can just take off the borders and just put a fence around our house and it will be fine, then I'm willing to sponsor you a flight, a plane ticket, and come over here and just go to Syria, to that specific spot where ISIS sits on the border, and you go there for 1 week and you come back and you prove to me that you can survive, that you can stay alive. And but there's another thing that you gotta do, is that you gotta pretend to be gay, because there are gay people in Israel, and unless you want them to die and you want everybody to be Muslim, so you're going to go to Syria with the shirt that on one side has a drawing of Muhammad, and on the back it's going to say I'm gay in all sorts of rainbow colors. And you have to go for 1 week into some city in Syria. The shirt says here, this is Muhammad, ha ha ha, I'm gay, all rainbow colors. I mean, you can do it in Tel Aviv, nothing would happen to you, right? And you suggested we take off the border and we just let everybody move wherever they want. So I want you to put yourself in that position that you're proposing that I should be in. And I'm willing to pay for the ticket and take you there. And I'm not asking for money in return or something. If it works, I will support open borders, officially. Like, hey, we did an empirical test and we tested the water and our fears are completely irrational. Now I can support open borders. So will you take that challenge? That's like the fourth question in this video. And maybe the fifth question would be, would you do the thing that is consistent with the non-aggression principle if it means you're going to die? It's going to be a honorable death because you lived according to your principle. Do you support living fully consistent with the non-aggression principle, knowing that it will lead to your death? For example, like, I tell you, okay, go to Syria with a shirt that says, this is Muhammad, I'm gay, all rainbow colors. Will you take the challenge? If no, why are you suggesting that I'm to support open borders with Syria, if you're not willing to go there and live according to the way that you want to live without letting anybody else dictate how you should live? I think that closes up everything I wanted to say. I don't want to make it too long, so people will kind of watch and interact and give me their input. So the first question was, what was it really? I think one of them was, would you support opening the borders if it means a disaster, like people dying, welfare system collapse? And well, I have to go over the video. I don't remember which was the question. But the last one was, will you put yourself in that position that you're suggesting me to take? And no, the last one was, will you die? Will you die for your principle? And if the answer is yes, then it's okay. Well, then I can call you suicidal. And I can tell people, don't support being consistent in every step of the way, because it leads to your death. It's irrational. It's completely lunatic. So, and I know some people support it. I've spoken with Larkin Rose about a different issue, about the issue of human shields, of the tactic of using human shields that Hamas was employing in Gaza. And I gave a hypothetical example. I say, suppose you live in some secluded area and there are two houses, and you live in one house with your family, there's another family living in this house, and they start shooting you. They're shooting you from the house, like from the window. They shoot at your house, and well, one option that you have is just to close all the windows and build some kind of a wall that absorbs the bullets, but then, they're going to escalate and use RPG and stuff. So my question is, if you cannot do a surgical attack and just hit the person that is doing the shooting and not harm the innocent people that are in the house, let's say there's a crazy guy and he keeps his family as prisoners, don't let them out. He goes out and maybe he orders pizza every day. They don't get out of the house, and he's shooting you and putting your family in danger. Will you support blowing up his house, knowing that that there's going to be collateral death, but it's going to be on his hands. The blood is going to be on his hands. And Larkin Rose's response was, well, I'd rather die a honorable death than kill innocent people. And I think that this is something that Larkin Rose, well, he said it in, I don't remember if it was a public comment or a private chat, but I don't hear him so much saying clearly and openly and boldly, this is my position. My position is we should live according to the non-aggression principle in every step of our life, even if it means we will die, because it's better to die a honorable death than to live like a coward. So, are you in that same position? And if Larkin Rose listen to this, please, I know that this is your position, let everybody know that this is what you support, that you support dying a honorable death, that you prefer, that this is one of your fundamental principle, to die a honorable death rather than get innocent people killed while protecting other innocent people. Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye.